Until the fire and riots, you may never have heard of the Pico-Union district. Now we're hearing plenty, a lot of it finger-pointing and recriminations. For Hugh Hewitt, Ruben Martinez, I'm Pat Morrison. Watch this on Life and Times.
This program is supported by a grant from the James Irvine Foundation, which is dedicated to the development of an informed California citizenry.
Welcome back. 40% of the population of Los Angeles is Hispanic, Latino, and 500,000 of those are invisible, people living in the Pico-Union district. You've spent a lot of time out there this week, the week before.
I don't understand why it was so invisible. I mean, there was flames, there was looting, there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of shock and anger in Pico-Union. In many ways, it was a community that was ready to blow up, but people hadn't been paying attention to it. It was an invisible community. People like drive through on their way to work, on their way from work. You know, people who are working downtown might drive down Pico Boulevard, but somehow they never seem to stop there. They go straight through and end up downtown and then go back home.
You've both covered the area. Compare the devastation in South Central to that in Pico-Union and the political leadership covering both as well.
Well, as to the devastation, the multiple tragedy of this is it isn't just physical devastation. A lot of these people come from countries where they've gone through exactly this sort of thing. It is déjà vu all over again for them.
Yeah, at the height of the disturbances on Thursday afternoon, Pico-Union resembled San Salvador at the height of a rebel offensive. It was just like that, and many people were saying it, and there were tears in people's eyes as they were looking at this happening in their body.
And the guardsmen on the street, the same thing.
Right. We have a tape made by Jeffrey Kay, the KCT's McNeil-Laird NewsHour correspondent. He visited Pico-Union. We'd like to show you what he saw there.
All around Los Angeles, the charred hulks of burned-out buildings remind residents of the chaos of just 2 weeks ago. As the flames and looting erupted, so too did the comparisons between 1992 and Watts in 1965. But there are big differences. In 1965, the unrest was confined to the South Central area, then a mostly black neighborhood. In 1992, the fires and looting were widespread. South Central LA, now a black and Latino neighborhood, was affected, but rioting also took place in poor communities throughout LA. Nearly 8,000 people were arrested in the city of Los Angeles.
Compared to 1965, why were the disturbances so spread out around Los Angeles this time?
I think you have many more communities with have-nots. I think that's the reality, is we've been spread out more.
LA City Councilman Mike Hernandez represents one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, Pico-Union, close to downtown, where 61 buildings were burned down.
This is a neighborhood that's basically very much people rich and resource poor. I have over 150 people living per acre in this particular area. We have an elementary school down the street with 2,000 kids, and we're trying to figure out where they're going to go to junior high school. We have no park space, no open space in this immediate area. High unemployment rate. It tends to be a first-stop center for people from Central America.
In the shadow of downtown, the Pico-Union neighborhood has the densest population in Los Angeles. Thousands of immigrants who fled El Salvador and Guatemala have turned Pico-Union into a neighborhood reminiscent of a Central American barrio. Not only are some street scenes similar, so is the poverty. Homeless people take up residence on the sidewalk. Street vendors hawk their wares. One, Sergio Miranda, witnessed the outbreak of violence last Wednesday night.
Por allá arriba bajó ya encendida.
¿En un carro o qué?
Un Benz de carro ya prendido con fuego.
Oh, he said a van, when I was cleaning up, there was a van that was coming down Bonnie Bray with like a Molotov cocktail that was already on fire, or something on fire, and y lo tiraron. And they threw it.
Ya se impactó en la barata.
And then it hit La Barata.
So you saw a Molotov cocktail go into
Usted vio que una como bomba incendiaria fue tirado ahí.
No, el Benz de carro se impactó y luego prendió fuego todo.
O de que lo tiraron de una van.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it thrown from a van, and it hit the La Barata, and I saw it blow up.
That fire reduced a thriving appliance store to a heap of charcoal. Some local residents were burned out of their homes in the violence. At the Central American Refugee Center, or Caresen, The needy picked up emergency supplies. Carecen also helps refugees apply for work permits. Some said when the rioting took place, they felt they were back in a war zone. Among them, a Salvadoran woman named Marta.
It's exactly what happened in my country. The buildings were looted, they were burned up, people were killed. Just when I go outside of my building and I see all that happening, I feel like I'm in my country. There's no peace.
Andres Candido, a Carecen staff member, says a lack of jobs for immigrants led to crime before and during the riots. Candido himself lives with his wife and 7 children a few blocks away in a one-bedroom apartment, an apartment that costs $800 a month to maintain. Candido earns $1,000 a month. The place is so crowded, he and his wife have to sleep behind a cardboard partition in their living room.
I know many people, many Salvadorans who've come to this country looking for work. And when they didn't find the work, I've seen many people who are honorable turn to drugs, to selling false documents, sell drugs for $10 or $15 in the street.
Not every Latino neighborhood in Los Angeles was affected by the violence in the same way as Pico-Union. On the other side of downtown is East Los Angeles, the traditional heart of the Mexican-American community here. Although this area, made up largely of blue-collar families, has its share of problems, it remained virtually immune from the violence that beset other neighborhoods, such as Pico-Union. The main reason, according to supermarket owner and businessman Joe Sanchez, a class difference. East LA is better off than Pico-Union.
There's a problem of the haves and the have-nots. These were the have-nots that really didn't have a lot to lose. In East LA, it wouldn't happen because most of the people have jobs.
So you felt that, you believe that people here feel they've got more of a stake in this community?
Yes.
Similar points were made at a press conference attended by Sanchez and other members of the influential Mexican-American Grocers Association.
You notice that Latino households are more likely than any other households to have your classic nuclear family. Mother, father, brother, sister, your dog Spot and your cat Puff increasingly is a Latino situation.
These community leaders were trying to ensure that Latinos are included in plans to rebuild LA. Their pleas were made in East Los Angeles to an attentive crowd of local news people. It was quite a contrast to a similar appeal made at the same time by Councilman Hernandez in the Pico-Union neighborhood. There was little press interest in Hernandez's attempt to publicize rebuilding efforts here.
This is the area where we weren't getting police response. This is the area where the fire department could not attend because they didn't have that police protection. And a lot of these buildings just went down.
But the problems in this neighborhood go beyond just physical devastation. Madeline Janis is Carecen's executive director. She says that the riots added a new layer of fear to the normal level of anxiety many people here feel.
On Saturday and Sunday of last week, when everyone else was talking about healing and reconciliation and calm, the federal government and the LAPD sent 400 Border Patrol agents right into the heart of the immigrant neighborhood, struck fear and terror into the hearts of many, many, many people. And the police called upon the INS, the Immigration Naturalization Service, to assist them in the arrest, detention of not only looters, not only people involved in the destruction and the rioting, but a lot of people just because of their ethnicity.
This man was one of 700 turned over to the Immigration Service out of thousands picked up by police during and after the rioting. He was kept in a cell with other deportees. With no air conditioning, the place seemed like a sauna. Civil rights lawyers complained that detention facilities are inhumane and that law enforcement officials used the riots as an opportunity for wholesale roundups of immigrants. Edward Flynn is Carecen's legal director.
Well, there's been appalling violations of people's civil liberties in Los Angeles in the last week and a half. Both the Los Angeles Police Department and the INS have been stopping people in huge numbers on the barest of pretexts or on no pretext at all, and have been demanding to know their immigration status. And if people respond that they're from another country, they have been taken immediately into INS custody. There appears to have been a concerted effort to root out people who are allegedly undocumented and to deport them as quickly as possible.
Robert Mushrak is district director of the Immigration Service. He described detention facilities as nice and said there was no wholesale roundup of immigrants.
So there were arrests being made, but not in such dramatic numbers as you would say or paint it as a roundup in the streets of illegal aliens. That was certainly not the case. Those efforts were targeted at specific individuals who were suspected of criminal violations, either because of thievery, looting, or that they were involved in some kind of gang activity. I think the numbers speak for themselves, and the numbers, I think, are dramatic. We know that over 700 people were taken into custody by INS as deportable aliens, people who were not supposed to be here, and their arrests were attributed directly to the civil unrest.
Since the riots, there have been calls for greater crackdowns on illegal immigrants. But Latino concerns go way beyond immigration matters. Latinos comprise some 40% of the LA population. Most have stable family ties and a strong work ethic. But the pattern of success and mobility goes just so far. There are still many neighborhoods where success and mobility have no home. That became painfully clear 2 weeks ago in places like Pico-Union, places that were ripe for burning.
Councilman Mike Hernandez has joined us in the studio now. The councilman represents the 1st District in Los Angeles, which comprises the Temple, Beaudry, Pico-Union, and Westlake, and some of the Central City areas. Mike, thanks for joining us again. I guess the first question I want to ask you is, why do you think Pico-Union was ignored so it was basically invisible for the first few days of the violence? Why weren't people talking about it?
The reality is that whole area has been ignored prior to the violence starting. As a representative of the area, I've spent a lot of time there because of the needs of the community, and I'm finding government is not responsive in terms of police protection. We don't have a presence of police in that area. The density is tremendous, and it's because it's an area where people can be. But it's the people who have no other resources to be anyplace else. If someone was to move out of Pico-Union, most likely they'd be moving to South Central LA.
Councilman, there's a huge tidal wave of federal dollars rolling our way. It'll get here sooner or later. Some are going to argue that the illegal immigrant community ought not to share in the availability of that funds, that they're taxpayer dollars. What's your response to that argument?
You know, from my perspective, it's when do we start talking about citizens of the city of Los Angeles? I mean, are we only supposed to respect those people who have the right to vote? Do we forget about our children? When do we start talking about the message this city gives the rest of the world when they talk about being an international city? I'm not the reason why those people are there, but I am the reason as to providing them the city services so that we do have representation. There's a lot of sad stories there, but they're human stories. And we as a society can't claim to treat everybody the same when we have separate classes and we treat them very differently.
Mike, you've been in the district close to, what, 9 months now?
Right.
Almost. Yeah. Did you have any sense of the magnitude of what was possible that could happen in Pico-Union? When it went up on Thursday afternoon, I was there, when it really started getting bad, did you have any sense that Pico-Union was one of the areas that was really going to go up? Did you sense
There was no
potential
question in
for
my
that?
mind. And if you watch the pattern of the, like what I call the crisis, it was heading from south, north, but it was going the pattern of basically income. It started in South Central, but it also had spurts in the Pico-Union area. The reality is the area that was being showed on the videotape is the highest crime rate, or crime is rampant in that area. We had 38 homicides within those 8 blocks last year alone. And I'm talking about those statistics of people who died at the spot, not the ones who died once they were taken to the hospital. Your density is tremendous. What's happened, and it's not just Latinos, by the way. When the mayor went down there with me, he found out that a lot of homeless people are there. We have a lot of folks from all over the world. A lot of the business people doing business there are from Persia. They're also Mexican-American. They're also Mexican. They're Korean. They're Chinese. It's really an international spot. And that's why I like to describe my district as the heart of Los Angeles. People rich and resource poor, because if we really focused on people and we spent our money according to people, I'd have a people rich, district rich, for resources, and we'd really be giving a different kind of message.
From the perspective of people outside of Southern California, and indeed from the perspective of some people on the periphery of Los Angeles, the Latino community is monolithic. They don't see any distinctions among them. In fact, one of your colleagues, Richard Alatorre, was asked last week why he was not visible, why, in fact, a number of the members of the Latino leadership were not visible. And he said, I feel bad for these people, but basically, that's not my table, that's not my district. What about this sense of writing off a certain portion of the population that are not voters? Does the East Los Angeles Latino population feel that they have no linkage, no kinship, no responsibility, whatever, in Pico-Union?
Well, I don't agree with the statements you just made to start. For one, when we talk about leadership, if you look at the African-American leadership, you were looking at the Reverend Murrays, you were looking at the John Macks, you were looking at the Joe Hicks. There was a different part of leadership, and then the political leadership was responsive to that group. When you look at the Pico-Union area, I was responding to the careces, the rescates, the clínicas para las médicas.
You were out. Gloria Molina was not out. Richard Alatorre was not out.
I want to finish my point, is when we talk about leadership, it should be the organizations that are working with the political leadership, and it's not fair to talk about the political leadership, because I think we were all trying to do as much as we could under those environments. But what's lacking is an understanding by the media of what's really going on in our neighborhoods, because I have a tremendous need to be responsive in that particular community. But the media was not portraying that. When I was listening to newspaper reporters as well as TV commentators saying they look illegal, I was trying to find out where the x-ray equipment was that showed that.
I don't think the media has any responsibility for the default of leadership in this.
Well, and again, when you talk about leadership, I was elected 7 months ago. Alatorre's been on the city council 4 years. Gloria Molina got on the city council basically a month after he did, and now she's a supervisor. Prior to that, we had no political voice at the city level or at the county level. It was organizations that gave us that opportunity, like Maldiv. I just want our community not to be perceived any different than any other community. But when you look at the population base there, it's a whole different group of people.
Well,
it's different because of the way we perceive them. They're no different than any other immigrant who's come to this state before. It's the way we're treating them today that is very different.
Looking ahead down the road a little bit, will a split develop between the Mexican-American constituency and the Central American constituency?
Not at all. You got to understand that when they put immigration to do the raids, they were putting Hispanics as a suspect class, using your term, but all Latinos were a suspect class. That meant that if they were walking on the street after curfew, they could be arrested, regardless of their immigration status.
Let's talk a little bit about the Border Patrol. I don't know if all our viewers knew what happened. At the height of the disturbances Thursday and Friday, we saw the Border Patrol entering the Pico-Union area, and what I heard, people being terrorized basically by seeing the sea green Border Patrol vans rolling down Alvarado.
And it was more like at Saturday. See, I was watching buildings burn down without any fire equipment to fight them or without any police to protect those firemen. And it happened all day Thursday. We had major demonstrations going on there, and there was no protection for the people there, for the businesses there, for the buildings there. And I kept on asking for the National Guard to provide that protection, to provide that presence, which is something we didn't have prior to the riots. What they ended up putting on Saturday was the Border Patrol there. And how they used them was an insult to our community as a whole, because all you had to do was look Latino. They didn't arrest anybody who was from Africa, anybody from Ireland, anybody from Japan, anybody from Asia. They were arresting people who looked Latino.
The LAPD has traditionally said it's not going to do the work of the Immigration Service. Yet under these circumstances, they worked with the INS. What can you do, what can be done in Pico-Union to restore faith to people in the LAPD to report the crimes against them?
Well, on Tuesday, the Police Commission is going to be dealing with the issue because we want to know who suspended the city's policy. The reality is, you heard the regional director of INS say they were arresting people who were suspect of. That's not what this country is about. There's supposed to be a due process. And anybody who committed a crime should be arrested, but they should go through our process of the courts and sentenced, and then if they get turned over to INS, that is the city's policy. But to stop people on the street and assume they committed a crime and take them into custody, there has to be question marks asked. Because there are reports that they were arresting bystanders, that children were taken into custody. Right now I have people in that community who we cannot get into a shelter because they believe we're going to turn them over to INS. We have children right now living next door to buildings that burn down because they're controlled, they're scared that the rent will go up.
But Councilman, are you saying that, and I will agree with you as a conservative civil libertarian, that to take advantage of chaos is wrong on the Border Patrol side, but are you saying that if someone is here illegally in that district, they ought to be left alone, a de facto amnesty should be granted?
No, what I am trying to say is we are giving a message to the rest of the world, to the rest of this country, about how we treat people. It is not my fault people came here. Los Angeles is like a magnet. I mean, we're the ones who want to be that international market. It's our country that's putting embargoes. There's a reason why people are coming here. They just want to survive. But when you talk about immigrants, my problem with it is, as a long-term Californian, whose grandfather was born in California, I try and understand who are immigrants. Why is it that we only look at one border? You got to understand that citizenship as a requirement to vote came about in the 1920s. Prior to that, you didn't have to be a citizen. You also have to understand that that's the same time we were removing poll taxes. But if someone from Kansas comes here and establishes residency for 32 days and has the right to vote and get social services, but someone who could be here for 30, 40 years as a legal resident who tried to be a citizen in 1958 and 59 when it was difficult, if we treat them different, I got a problem. And it's because they sit there paying taxes like everybody else, they own property, their children go into the military service like everything else, but we denied them citizenship because they couldn't pass a human exam when they went in front of an officer. California has the worst record of citizenship passage. When you compare it to New York, to Florida, to Texas, there is discrimination going on, but it's happening against Latinos.
Mr. Hernandez, thank you very much. I know we're going to be getting back to this. It's not only people like Mike Hernandez who are setting the agenda for the city of Los Angeles now. It's people like you, and we hope you'll do it through programs like this one. To that end, if you have a camcorder, please send your tape remarks to something surprisingly called Camcorder Comments, KCET Newsroom, 4401 Sunset Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90027, or you can call us at 213-667-9371. And if we can use your comments on the air, you must leave us a telephone number where we can reach you.
And let's take a look very quickly at 3 sets of numbers you can call if you suffered in the riots and need some help rebuilding. The Mayor's Office, Business and Economics Department. The address is City Hall, Room 2000, 200 North Spring Street, Los Angeles 90012. And the phone number is 213-485-6154. Call us at the station if you didn't write it down. Or call the Small Business Association at Federal Station, 1-869 Los Angeles, California 90053. Their number, 213-488-1825. Finally, you can also check in with the Los Angeles Minority Business Development Center, which is on South Figueroa, 601 South Figueroa, Suite 1370, LA, California 90017. The number 213-488-4949, or call KCET, and if you call KCET, we'll give you those numbers back.
Okay, it's time for final thoughts. Some quick thoughts. Hugh?
The councilman's very eloquent. I think there are some other arguments that need to be made, that illegals produce a net plus to the economy, and that they should not be ignored for that reason. And maybe it's time to talk about amnesty again for the illegal population so we can put that debate behind us and get back to productive discussion.
Pat?
One portion of the Latino population overlooked in this is in South Central Los Angeles, where in the last 10 or 12 years they are on the verge of becoming a majority. There is no one who is representing them from within their own Latino constituency because they're cutting up the turf politically. That's a black politician's area. The East Side is a Latino politician's area. We're going to come to loggerheads over that, as perhaps we ought.
Mm-hmm. As for me, we were talking about language and changes in language we have to make in this city, in this society. One of the terms I'd like to change is the term you used, illegal. It just got a whole bunch of baggage that comes with it. These people are not doing anything illegal. They're here working really hard. They're paying taxes. Even if they have a fake Social Security card, they're paying taxes.
And sales tax.
And sales tax, of course. So I don't think they're illegal. I think they're undocumented, and I think we should document them so they can be fully legal here. That's about all we have time for. Thanks for joining us on Life in Times. We'll see you next time.
This program was made possible by a grant from the James Irvine Foundation, which is dedicated to the development of an informed California citizenry.